Good morning, everyone. Just going to let a few more people join since we've just opened up, and then we will get cracking with this morning's webinar. Hope everyone's doing well today. Morning, Iona. Feel free to say hi in the chat to everyone and introduce yourselves to the other attendees whilst we're getting set up. Okay, well, we're going to record this session, so I'm going to get started now, and then anyone who's late joining or isn't able to join us this morning, we're going to send the recording out to everyone who's signed up. And this is normally the point where then you see a load of people drop off because they're like, oh, I've got lots of stuff to do, so they're going to crack on with the day and get the recording. But if you can stick with us, that would be great, because we'd love to have your questions as we go. So it's great to see so many people here. I'm going to hand over to Alex and Richard, who are going to talk to us about their lessons from Greenpeace. So Richard is joining us from Greenpeace, and Alex is one of the co-founders of Forward Action, and I'm Partnerships Director. I'm going to be taking questions at the end, though. So if you use the Q&A function to ask any questions as we go, and Kate and I will either answer them as we go if they're simple ones, or we will group them at the end, and we should hopefully have around 15 minutes to talk through those questions as well. We want to make sure that we've got plenty of time for that. So I will also be sending gentle nudges to Alex and Richard if it looks like they're talking at length around the really fascinating work that we've done with Greenpeace, because it's really important to get that Q&A time at the end. I think the only other thing to say is that we're trialing using captions today. So if you need to switch on the live transcript, there's a little feature just down by the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and you can turn on the subtitles. So it's National Deaf Awareness Week, or we're really delighted to be able to do this, and we'd really like to know if there's anything else that we can do to make our sessions as accessible as possible to everyone. So there may be a survey coming around at the end of this as well, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. And that is enough for me. I will hand over to Alex and Richard. Enjoy.
Brilliant, thanks Ali, and thanks everyone for joining us bright and early. It's really good to have you. So today we're going to be talking about a project Forward Action and Greenpeace worked on last year to grow Greenpeace's email fundraising program with non-donors. And I'm really pleased to be talking about this for two reasons. One, Greenpeace has a kind of special place in Forward Action's heart. They were our second ever partner back in 2015 when we first started, and we've been working together ever since. And secondly, this project, of all the work we've done over the years, I think is one of the most impactful in terms of the results that it's generated, but also the longer term impact of the kind of model we were able to prove together, and how Greenpeace is going to move forward with using email fundraising to raise significant amounts of money for the organization and to fund their campaigns. So it's really great to be talking about this, and big thank you to Richard for being with us. So we're just going to start by, I'll hand over to Richard, who will talk through a little bit of background to the project, and then I'll talk through the strategy we set. We'll explain what we did and the results, and then finally we'll go through some learnings and takeaways for other organizations that you can hopefully go and apply from this. And then, as Ali said, some questions at the end. Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Alex, and hello, everyone. I would say good to see you all. I can't actually see you, but good to be talking to all of you. Just to introduce myself, I'm Richard from Greenpeace. I've worked for Greenpeace for 7 years now, so a fair long period of time. in various different digital roles. In our digital team when I started for Greenpeace International, and now doing digital fundraising. I thought just sort of start on this slide with talking a little bit about Greenpeace. I mean, I'm sure many of you are aware of our campaigns on climate change, plastics, forests, oceans, and things like that. But just to sort of explain the sort of the structure of the organisation at Greenpeace UK, we have about 100 staff. And when I started, we had a digital team, like the team that sort of ran petitions on the website and things like that, of about 6. Now that's about 10. I think it might even be sort of going up to 12. And then we have digital roles, and that's just the sort of the separate digital team, what we call the digital mobilization team. I have a separate role in fundraising, which is entirely about digital fundraising. There's maybe about 5 other people who have similar roles to me in various different teams, doing digital stuff. A lot of people working on ads too, and there's our support services team, but also replies to a lot of our comments and deals with a lot of questions on social media too. So we have, out of an organization of 100, like pushing on for 20 people who have digital as either the sort of a major part of their role or the substantive part of their role. So it's sort of only increasing really. And then on top of that, we also have a separate analytics team who sort of help to analyze our work in terms of the results. And because of that, we've grown our email list to about 1.5 million over the last few years. And it sort of settled at about 1.5 million. I think it was about 500,000 when I started 7 years ago. And we're still looking at ways we can continue to sort of to grow it and try and push it up to 2 million by the end of the year, sort of start of next year. And we send around 1 full list email per week, at least 1 full list email per week. Sometimes it's like 3, if not 4 full list emails per week to our support list of 1.5 million. So we're sending a lot of emails at the moment, but not a huge amount of fundraising emails, which is what we're going to talk about today. So next slide, please, Alex. So we've worked with Forward Action a lot, as Alex mentioned, and we've been doing that for several years. And this is one of the areas that we did a lot of work on quite a few years ago, which is our petition pages. So this is just sort of like 3 screenshots, and it probably looks quite simple, really. I'm not really sure that this sort of does justice to the amount of work that Forward Action did to really optimize these pages, because there's so much going on here. I mean, I could talk about this for probably the next hour of the work that we did here, from tests of like the format of that page for sort of the first screen that people see, testing, does it have a petition counter or not, testing what number we set the petition counter at, do we set it at 125,000, do we set it at 150,000, 200,000, testing that progress bar at the top where it says signed, shared, and then the pound sign and the middle screen, testing the color of buttons, testing the layout, testing the wording of the thank you page, the order of those thank you pages. It's just the amount of work that went into them, which is phenomenal. So that's something that we've really focused on. But next slide, please, Alex. One thing that we hadn't done so much is sending that many fundraising emails. A lot of the tests that we've done were around our petitions, so sending out petitions and getting people to sign those petition pages that were on the last screen. I think actually before I took on this role full time, which was in April last year, email fundraising in terms of trying to get new direct debit supporters, recruiting, what we call recruitment at Greenpeace UK, was 20% of one person's role. So, 1 day per week, effectively. So not that much. We did have other people talking to our existing donors, people who already send out emails to people who already have a regular donation to us. We had one person doing that, but we didn't have one person really doing this work, which is why we rejigged things for me to take that on more. So next slide, please. So this sort of outlines some of the goals. We had a kickoff meeting with Forward Action, I think in April or May last year, and my boss at the time, Grania, who's now on maternity leave, jokingly said, let's try and get to 500 direct debits per month, as in new direct debits, new supporters per month from our current level, which was about 100 per month. So to quintuple that, at the start of the pandemic too, I started this role at the start of the pandemic. I think it's fair to say that I was pretty skeptical that this would actually be possible. And we ended up settling at about 300. I mean, I think Grania was also partly joking when she said, let's try and get to 500. But it did sort of set the ambition for this role. And actually that is what we ended up managing to do at the end. We managed to get to an average of, well, just below 500, I think it was, over the course of the whole year, and certainly more than 500. So we finished at about 5,000, and we, over the course of 2020 and in 2019, we had about 1,000 donors, but we'll talk more about those later on. And I think I'm handing back to you now, Alex.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. I'm really pleased we managed to get the word quintuple into this, so good job. Yeah, so that was essentially the starting point, kind of joke or not, was essentially if we have this like blue sky target of significantly increasing the number of direct debits Greenpeace was bringing in over email, and we had a 6-month window to do it in. We started with this question for the kind of essentially the question was, what is the strategy to do that? Is that possible? So the first thing we did was a bit of a fact check around what is achievable here, and can we hit that actual target of 500 per month? And to work that out, we looked at data from other organizations who have, like Greenpeace, a large email list. And there were a few reasons to believe that it would be possible to significantly increase the number of direct debits we were bringing via email that we found. So the first one was we looked at Bernie's 2020 presidential campaign in the US. He had an email list of around 9 to 10 million people, which is a proportion to the size of the US, is basically the same as Greenpeace's list as a proportion to the size of the UK. And then over essentially the same 12-month period in 2019, he raised $80 million via email fundraising, which was over 40% of the campaign's total fundraising income. And although the population of the US is obviously larger, it's around 6 to 7 times our population, he was essentially raising, I think, somewhere between like 700 and 1,000 times more for email fundraising than Greenpeace had during that same period. So a clear evidence case there, but it is possible to raise a lot more money via email than Greenpeace had been. Obviously, the US is a specific context, so we wanted some UK examples as well. And there's evidence from the Labour Party, again, an organisation with a very large email list, that it would be possible to rapidly scale up an email fundraising program based off new donors. So in the 2015 election, Labour raised just over £3 million in 18 months. And the majority of that came from brand new donors, from around 100,000 new donors. And then in 2017, they did even better, raising 4 million in just under 2 months. The third piece of evidence that we found was looking at email volume and how Greenpeace's email fundraising volume compared to other organizations. So this is data from the M&R benchmarks, which are benchmarks that so far have only been done in the US, but they're actually bringing to the UK this year, which is very exciting, collaborating with an organization called Rally on that. But they're a really useful resource. If you've not seen them, the latest report came out, I think, last week, and they're really interesting and worth a read. And they look at a bunch of digital fundraising metrics and benchmarks across the sector, essentially. But this graph shows across a range of different issues that organizations work on, the volume of email that the organizations are sending on average to each subscriber every year. And you can see the yellow bars are fundraising. And so on average, organizations are sending over 20 fundraising emails per year to each supporter. In some issue areas like international development, that's nearer 40. And if we compare that to what Greenpeace was doing in 2019, just on the fundraising email side, as Richard says, Greenpeace sends a lot more kind of advocacy and mobilization email. You can see we're right down here at about 5 emails per supporter, so much lower than any average of any of these sectors. And bearing in mind that a lot of this average would include a lot of organizations who are much smaller than Greenpeace and have a much lower profile. So there was clear evidence that there was, in terms of what's normal across successful email fundraising programs, there was scope to be sending more email. And then the final and probably the best reason to believe was actually from Greenpeace itself, which is, as Richard mentioned, there's a separate email fundraising program for previous donors to either encourage them to make repeat donations, or if they're a one-off donor, to encourage them to set up a monthly donation. And we'd worked on that program between sort of 2015 and 2017 with a very similar brief and achieved similar results of essentially quadrupling the income that program was raising. So that led us to believe that this would be possible to do on this fundraising program with non-donors. And generally our conclusion from looking into these other examples is that Greenpeace's email list was likely a huge untapped fundraising resource, and that it would be possible to significantly increase the number of direct debits we were generating through email fundraising. So to do that, there are essentially two levers that we identified that we could pull to raise more direct debits. So this is our kind of starting point of the data from 2019. You can see that Greenpeace sent around 7.4 million fundraising email total, which actually only works out at 0.4 monthly emails per supporter. So that means that each supporter is basically getting 5 fundraising emails a year. 1,200 direct debits off that, which gives you a conversion rate of emails sent to direct debits of 0.016. So the two things we can change here, we identified that we can obviously change to improve the number of direct debits that we're getting, is firstly the conversion rate. So that would mean that if your conversion rate went up, every email you're sending is essentially working harder and you're getting more direct debits per email sent. We didn't have a clear benchmark of what the conversion rate should be. The reason for that is that it varies hugely across organizations, but particularly on the size of your email list. And there is a general kind of universal rule that the larger your email list, the lower your per email conversion rate is in general. And that's because as your list grows, you kind of move beyond your earliest, kind of most engaged, keenest supporters who are much more active, and you start mixing in a broader range of people who have very different levels of activity. So as a whole, your conversion rate goes down, but across that big list, you can still generate much more action than you can with a smaller list. So although we weren't really certain what we were aiming for, we thought it was unlikely that we would be able to hit our target purely by increasing conversion rate 5-fold, which meant that we knew that increasing the number of emails we were sending was going to be actually the most important thing that we could be doing. And the reason for that is it kind of illustrates a general rule that we know about email programs, which is that email is quite a low penetration channel. If you compare it to, say, face-to-face or telemarketing or SMS, it's a much less intrusive channel, and that means it generates relatively lower action rates. So if you send out an email, it's kind of jostled in your supporters' inboxes alongside all the other emails they get, and the majority of people won't even see the email, and of those who do, not everyone will open it, not everyone will take action. And those reasons that people don't open and take action are often completely outside our control. You know, they may be busy, or they may not be feeling motivated at that point, or, you know, if it's a fundraising ask, they may be strapped for cash that day. So what you see across email programs, not just fundraising, but also mobilization, and is part of the reason Greenpeace send a lot of mobilization emails, is that if you want to generate a lot of action, you need to give via email, you need to give people lots of opportunities to take action. So you need to be sending them regular emails with regular actions. And that applies for fundraising as well. So we knew that sending emails was going to be more emails, essentially, was going to be a really important part of the strategy for increasing direct debits. So to work out exactly how many emails we need to send, we looked at a few different scenarios based on how much we could increase the conversion rate. The specific numbers here aren't important. We had a kind of 6-month window where we wanted to generate, or for this project, where we wanted to generate 3,000 direct debits, so 500 a month. And these numbers kind of can look terrifying on the face of it, sort of 10 to 17 million emails sent over the course of 6 months. But if you actually break that down to emails per supporter per month, you can see there's actually only 1 to 2 fundraising emails per supporter per month, which puts us well around the average or below the average even of that benchmark data. So actually is kind of achievable. So based on all that, we landed on three key points for our strategy for this program. So the first is we just needed to send more fundraising emails to more people. and there would be no substitute for increasing that volume. But secondly, we also wanted to improve the conversion rate on those emails. So to do that, we suggested that we test a range of new tactics to find those which would perform best for Greenpeace, and also start to build in technology optimization so that Greenpeace's donation technology was working harder and we were getting higher conversion rates for people landing on it. And then the third thing was to be able to learn and make decisions in real time. So rather than pre-setting a course for 6 months, planning a bunch of content and then delivering it rigidly, we wanted to be able to try things out, see which tactics worked best, and then make the most of those tactics. So to send them to more people, or to do them again, or to kind of kick them with a reminder email. In order to do that, we had weekly check-in calls to look at the data, look at performance, and then change our plans and our content calendar as we went along. Okay, so Richard, over to you to talk about how we actually did the implementation.
Thanks, Alex. So I'm just checking my notes. So yeah, how we did it, how we delivered it. So the plan that Forward Action came back with actually ended up matching up quite nicely with what we were thinking already. In terms of the new tactics there's some things that we did around surveys and something that we called a membership drive, which is a big direct debit drive that we were thinking to do, which we were already considering. But as Alex said in the previous slide, the thing that really sort of hit home, as simple as it sounds, was just the idea of sending more emails and really crunching the numbers on how many we had to send to sort of try and get to that target, to the volume that we need to be getting out of the door, because we hadn't really even done that sort of simple maths on it until now. So we ended up changing the plan quite a bit, tweaking it, at least tweaking it, not necessarily sort of changing it till we actually sort of like found our feet. And that was possible because of these weekly calls. And what we were finding was to be able to sort of to meet that goal of just sending more emails, not necessarily just direct fundraising asks, but getting something out of the door that had a fundraising ask incorporated into it at some stage, required someone to be writing emails a lot. So we were originally asking Forward Action to do that, but we changed it so that I took that on. And also I quite enjoyed writing the emails too. So that ended up being sort of like quite nice. And I didn't have anyone to be able to do the technical work internally. So the tech side and the optimization side, the analysis side, suggesting tweaks, suggesting additional tests that could be sort of like integrated in last minute, that came out from Forward Action in those weekly calls, with me coming to the meeting on the sort of a Monday afternoon and saying, right, we've got this opportunity this week, I'm going to write an email, and then we discuss it and then be looking to launch something the sort of like a week or two after, or even sometimes like a few days after. Yeah, so that was the approach we took. Next slide, please, Alex. So these are the final numbers, the sort of top line results of what we achieved. So emails sent, that's total number of recipients, if you will, pushing on for sort of for 22 million, which was just a much, such a substantial increase from last year that actually we need to do a bit of work this year to sort of to keep up with it, because we were sending much more emails than we usually would. But the average monthly gift went up, which wasn't one of our objectives, but was a sort of certainly something that we were really pleased with in terms of the results. So we didn't see people donating less money per month. We actually saw people donating on average more money per month. And we got past 5,000 direct debits in the end to 5,113. And I think that what's really interesting is that, like, yeah, the conversion rates went up, but also there was a feeling within Greenpeace. I feel that if we asked people for money more, we would start to see really high unsubscribe rates. And we didn't actually see that in the end. We saw like similar unsubscribe rates to what we got from our petition emails, which we'd be regularly sending out to big audiences. So I'm not really sort of sure where that came from. I mean, maybe it comes back to the rule that's like, if you send people interesting content on issues that they're engaged with, then people will stay subscribed to your list, or they're going to unsubscribe anyway, whether it's a donation ask or it's a petition ask or like whatever. But obviously we need to sort of to continue to sort of dig into and hope those unsubscribe rates remain the same. Next slide. So this is something that one of the senior managers at Greenpeace sent to me when we had a Greenpeace International call comparing results from different offices, which breaks down the different channels. And I think this is the thing that really sort of put things in context for me in terms of what we did with email last year. So that sort of pink salmon coloured bar that's in the middle there, that's our income from emails, and it's the same colour across all of the other different Greenpeace offices. So you can see that other Greenpeace offices aren't really doing this. So actually, other Greenpeace offices aren't really using email either. So it's a position that we were in sort of a year and a half ago. And I mean, obviously, this is, like it says a lot about how much we managed to increase it as a segment, as a channel that is a substantial area of income now for Greenpeace UK. But also the fact that there's just work to be done across the organisation too, within Greenpeace, and how we're using email there, and it being probably an underutilised channel across several different offices, and not just the UK. Next slide. So what did we learn? Here's some of the sort of the best performing tactics, not necessarily in the order of what achieved the most in terms of results, but just things that we sort of felt stood out. So this is what we call the campaign survey, but I guess I just sort of call it a survey in general, really. So Greenpeace once a year, sort of around October, November time, sends a survey to its full email list. We usually send once and then send a reminder, and sometimes send a second reminder to get as many people completing it as possible. And we tend to get like high completion rates on it, despite the fact that it tends to take like 15 minutes for people to fill in, like if not longer. But I think some years we've had 100,000 people fill it in from our email list of 1.5 million. So people are really engaged with it, and the reason that we do it every single year is because we want to sort of to get an idea of the issues that our supporters care about, where they're at with our different campaigns, their understanding of our different campaigns, and to also just get a sense of like what we look like as an organisation, like where are our supporters, where do they live, what are the demographics, because we do a big piece of sort of like crunching the numbers after it and sort of saying this is what we look like as an organisation. But what we tend to see as a side effect of that is we were getting a substantial amount of donations at the end. We just put a really simple page at the end and say, thank you very much for filling in the survey. Would you be now willing to sort of chip in to support our work? So we expanded on that concept last year, especially because last year was obviously so difficult because of the pandemic. Our campaigns were changing a lot, our plans were changing a lot. So it was a good chance to sort of to bring supporters into the huddle, if you know what I mean, as opposed to just saying, here's a petition, please sign it. Here's a template to your MP, please fill it in and send it. Here's a donation, please give us some money. It's like, actually, there's a pandemic going on. There's a lot of big questions being asked, not just about how we run the country, but how does the world run? And it's like, let's have a conversation about that. So with some of the campaigns that we were launching that we knew, it was a good opportunity for us to sort of ask questions, like bigger questions about some of the issues that we didn't even necessarily like have a campaign on, but we did want to sort of talk to our supporters on it and sort of see where they were at with it. So at the end, we're doing more of them. We were seeing more donations too. So we were now trying to sort of integrate these into more campaigns, particularly at the start. And also because, like, if you can skip to the next slide, please. I sort of see surveys as being an educational tool too, because say if you're creating a survey that says 5 or 6 minutes to fill in, you know, you can have, as much as we try to sort of to make the questions quite short, so it would make it easier for people to sort of to complete it and not get stuck halfway through the survey. It allows you to sort of to drill into the details some more. So as a sort of a campaigning tool, I think that surveys are really effective And certainly as a fundraising tool, it was a big kick for us. I think maybe about last year, 20% or something like that, or 25% of our monthly donations ended up coming up on the back of surveys in the end. And this was a new tactic that we introduced too, which was giving people the option to sort of to choose whether they wanted to donate or not. I mean, it also means that we can send it out to our full list and not have to worry about people separating out donors or non-donors. Because it means that people can say, oh, well, if I'm an existing donor, it's like, well, I'm already chipping in, so I'm not going to give some money right now. I think there's sort of a couple of things going on here. It allows people to sort of say, well, yes, I'm willing to chip in, and to sort of make that commitment in their mind and then present them with a donation page afterwards. And then to sort of to opt out. But interestingly, most people actually clicked option B, which is not right now. Like 90% of people will click that. And then at the end, we say, okay, well, you can't donate, but would you be interested in signing this petition, or here's some other issues you can sort of work on? So we'd often see like a boost in our petitions too on the back of surveys, which was so it was a nice little way of like engaging people with an issue, bringing people into the huddle, presenting it back to the sort of our campaign team leaders and saying, this is what our supporters said, boosting donations and boosting petition signatures too. So surveys, like I really, can't speak enough about like how useful they are across loads of different areas within campaigns. And next slide. So this was another tactic that we used. We called it a membership drive, sort of a better way to put it. So this is a technique that we took from Greenpeace Canada, and I think that some other organisations do a similar thing too. Certainly 38 Degrees has a big push, a big drive, fundraising drive, if you will, at the end of each year. And the reason that I was keen on it is because when we tend to sort of to get to December at Greenpeace, like as much as our email calendar can be quite busy for most of the year, December people started going on holiday and taking time off for Christmas. And then our campaigns tend to come to an end and go back into planning at the start of January. So there's this period from about halfway through December to the first couple of weeks in January, the organisation didn't really send any emails at all. So I was thinking, well, why don't we use this as an opportunity to sort of to send more fundraising emails and do one of these big fundraising drives? And because we weren't really launching campaigns, we were sort of thinking, well, what's the hook going to be? So we took it from some of the emails that were written by Greenpeace Canada and just adapted them for the UK, where we were just telling people about the organisation, and we were just sort of saying, we had some emails from our finance team, which you can see here was written by Andy, who's our head of finance. Well, it was written by me, but signed off by Andy. And then we had one that was from our head of actions, and we talked about like direct action and why sometimes Greenpeace thinks it's necessary to break the law and what's the theory behind that. And we talked about that in the context of other groups who've taken direct action too. So it was kind of telling people about the organisation and not necessarily going into too much detail of the campaign. And so we sent those full lists. I think we sent about 5 or 6 emails full list over the course of about 3 weeks, and like right up to the end of December. It meant we had to be doing a bit of work in between Christmas and New Year. But again, because that period was clear, it meant that we weren't sending anything else. So the calendar was wide open. And then on the back of that, I think I'm still on the right slide. But on the back of it, the results were we got 1,000 direct debits, which was the target that we set, in that we sort of said that to our supporters we were going to use that money to fund our work in 2021, as we sort of look at how we campaign within the pandemic world, and that sort of thing of sort of saying, well, we'd like to get to this point, probably sort of helped us meet that target too. So that's definitely something we're hoping to repeat again this year. And next slide. And then the other tactic that we did was just to sort of to try and ride on the back of real world events. So obviously, because of pandemic, people were home were watching more TV. And one of the big nature documentaries last year was David Attenborough's Extinction, the Facts documentary. So I think we actually only came up with a plan to write this 2 or 3 days before the documentary aired. and we sent it, I think, at 9 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. after the documentary had finished, because I got it written, but I remember there were some problems with launching it. So it might have even been pushing on 10 p.m. But it was one of our top performing emails of the year. Like, the average gift was higher, the click rate was higher, the open rate was higher, the conversion rate was higher than any of our other appeals that we ran. I mean, and that was, we actually only sent it to a small segment of our list. I wish that we'd sent this to our full email list last year, and because obviously nobody else was sending anything at 10 p.m. on a Sunday evening, so the list was kind of wide open to send something then. But yeah, so it meant we could have even pushed that out to even more people. But that's something that we're hoping to do more, is just to be able to sort of jig things around, because we do it with our mobilization emails, and whereas fundraising emails, we were blocking them in and saying, we're going to plan this email now and send something in 3 weeks time, as opposed to saying on a Monday, right, okay, there's this thing coming up on a Wednesday, so we're going to send it on Wednesday night. Next slide, please.
I think it's back to me.
Oh, it's back to you.
Brilliant, thanks, Richard. So yeah, I'm just going to talk very briefly about the optimization work we did as part of this project on the technology side. So we only had actually in the end around a 3-month window to do the optimization testing. So our goal for it was less to deliver optimizations that would have a significant impact on the results from that kind of 6-month window of email fundraising, and more to do like a proof of concept that we could design a process and run an ongoing A/B testing program alongside this the email fundraising work, in a similar way to, as Richard was talking about at the beginning, that we've done with petition technology. Can we do the same with donation technology? So to do that, we ran 3 tests over the last 3 months of 2020 on email structure and technology user experience. I'm not going to go into too much detail on all the tests, but just to give you an example of the kind of thing that we were testing, this is what Greenpeace's donation page looks like when you land on it. You have this choice, either a monthly donation or one-off. And depending on what you choose, you go down these separate paths to complete your monthly donation or complete your one-off donation. And our priority for this project was to increase the number of monthly donations set up, even at the expense of one-offs. So we decided to trial a UX that basically presented it as like a conscious choice that people needed to make. So rather than kind of equally valid options for the user, we wanted to point them towards monthly donation. So we changed the user experience where you chose your amount first, and then on the same slide, you were then asked whether or not you wanted to make it monthly. Interestingly, this didn't improve performance in the test, but what we were able to kind of successfully do for these tests was demonstrate that this process of getting tests set up and aligning them with emails so that we had email traffic to get test results worked really well, and there's something that we're going to take forward. We've got a few ideas for optimization testing we want to run this year and next year, so we're really keen to test integrating Apple and Google Pay into Greenpeace's donation technology. They're obviously very low friction payment gateways that are increasingly common across checkouts across the web. So and Greenpeace's new technology has the functionality to integrate them, so we're going to test that. We've also seen with other organizations some really promising results of building an ask to set up a Facebook fundraiser into a kind of daisy chain of asks after people have donated. So it's kind of a way of someone contributing more to the organization and raising more money for the organization after having just donated, but without having to give more of their own money. And we've seen some really interesting results. So we're keen to test this with Greenpeace. And then finally, continue to focus on optimizing the basics, even things like what is the size of the ask prompts we're asking people for in donation technology. So to illustrate the importance of that, this is a test we ran with Refuge recently, where the test was increasing this bottom amount that's currently £500. It used to be £75 to run a Refuge amount. We increased it to 500 and A/B tested against 75, and we found that increasing to 500 for this test doubled the amount of income that we raised through the page overall, because there were still a number of people willing to give that top level amount. So that's obviously a particularly powerful impact, but it illustrates the importance of continuing to optimize the basics, even if it's just how much money you're actually asking people for. So we're going to keep doing that. Richard, over to you to quickly go through what you're doing this year and then the plans for next year, and then we'll wrap up with some learnings.
Thank you, Alex. So yeah, I mean, what we're doing this year is it says at the sort of the top there, is trying to cement that approach, because we had such a large increase, and now we have to sort of well, it was a record year, but now we have to sort of to try and match that, which this year is proving a bit easier said than done, because our email platform and our petition platform and some of our donations were taken via BSD, which obviously shut it down. We come in every action, and we're moving away from that. So we've got a big project at the moment, that as much as it's going to be brilliant when it's done, it is sort of impacting how we send out emails, particularly fundraising stuff. So there have been some moments where it's been difficult to sort of get the volumes we need. And 2020 last year, like a lot of our campaigns, because obviously the pandemic changed everything, it meant that like a lot of our campaigns from last year have been carried through to this year. So we've got like a busier campaign schedule. So trying to sort of find as many windows for fundraising emails hasn't been as easy. I think it's still doable. I think there's also some questions about like resourcing too. I mean, obviously we're working with Forward Action a lot, but you know, just having one person work on email and one person work on those website tests that Alex just talked about there too isn't really enough. So we're sort of trying to work it out internally too, in terms of like just making sure that we've got enough time to be able to deliver the work we want to. But yeah, there's so much stuff that we could do. I mean, even, yeah, as Alex mentioned, the sort of the testing of Google Pay and Apple Pay, which would hopefully be quite straightforward. And then there's things like on our thank you pages, when people have made a donation, we don't like really have a get supporter sort of ask, which I know a lot of organizations do, have been like, you know, can you share the fact that you've donated and things like that. So there's plenty of work to be done. But probably when we've finished the move over to our new engagement platform. So I think that 2022, well, the end of this year and the start of next year are going to be really exciting and interesting to see where the work goes. And yeah, and well, as I've said before, can't really speak highly enough about the work that Forward Action did. We've really seen, sometimes looking back, the sort of the work, the suggestions seem sort of like quite simple, but it was still sort of stuff that we hadn't really thought of, and just really brought a new dimension to just making sure that we were tweaking stuff and pushing things forward and constantly having new ideas, which I think is difficult if it's just one person working on these areas of work.
Cool, thanks, Richard. And yes, I agree, actually, like a lot of the recommendations are quite simple, which leads us quite nicely onto this point, which is what can other organizations and the organizations for everyone listening take from this. So I talk a lot about Greenpeace when I go around organizations explaining what digital mobilization can do and trying to give people a sense of the impact it could have for them or their organization. And I talk about Greenpeace because they're probably the leading organization in the UK in the impact they've been able to create for their campaigns and now their fundraising through digital mobilization. An answer I get a lot, which is completely understandable, is that's all very well for them, but we're not Greenpeace. You know, we can't be as punchy as Greenpeace can be. And we can't send an activist up the Shard and then fundraise off the back of that. And we don't have as many campaigns, and you know, we don't have 15 staff working on digital. So like, we can't do this. And actually, like, the evidence that, you know, I give to people is that digital mobilization works for a full range of organizations working on different issues, whether they are like service focused or campaign focused as Greenpeace is, and of different sizes. And I think one of the things that's kind of interesting to me about this project is that it really illustrates that like a lot of the stuff we did to succeed here, as Richard said, is quite simple and all things that other organizations, pretty much any organization, can be doing. So I think there's 5 key takeaways to take from this, the things that you can do at your organization. So firstly, if you want to drive more action via email, you just need to send more email. There is no substitute for that. Like that's essential, and that is built into the laws of email mobilization, essentially. Secondly, that it's worth trialing some different tactics to find out the ones that work well for you. And then once you find those tactics, go big with them. So send them to as many people as you can, send reminder emails, and you can also reuse them down the road and kind of iterate them. And this comes back to the point about the importance of being able to plan your content flexibly. So don't plan out a 6-month or a year's email calendar and then rigidly stick to that, depending on whether it works or not. If something works, think, okay, how can we make the most of it? How can we send it to as many people as we can? How can we like rejig it and use it again in 3 months? But on the flip side to that, even if you're not in a position to be agile with your planning, as Richard said, some of the biggest successes we had during this project came from really wringing the most out of the emails that were planned months in advance, of these kind of big fundraising moments at the end of the year. And also the email welcome journey that we set up for, that had been set up for new supporters, just brought in a really regular stream of direct debits. It contributed, I think, something like 15 or 20% of our total just through the welcome journey. So optimizing that, even if agile planning at this stage is a little difficult and something you need to work towards, there's a lot of benefit to be got from that. And then the final point is that it is worth building in this regular A/B testing technology, but only once you've nailed these fundamentals above. And the reason I emphasize that is that I think it's quite a common impulse that we see at organizations to, when they start doing this kind of work, to sort of jump straight to the technology optimization stuff without actually first increasing the volume and quality of the fundraising email they're sending. And I think that can happen because actually in some ways it can be easier to start testing technology than it can be to do the work to get the internal buy-in and the process needed to actually be sending more email, and like the resource to be resource dedicated to writing email to do it well in the way that Richard did. And it can be easier just to sort of focus on the technology. But the issue there is if, however good your optimization is, however good your technology is, if you're not driving traffic to your pages, you're not going to convert to donations. So there is no substitute for the 2 basics: send more email, make sure the email you send is as good as possible. Okay, that's it. So I think we have some time for questions. So back to you, Annie.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. I hope everyone's found that really informative, and we've had loads of brilliant questions come through. We're due to finish at 9:50. I think we can keep going for to at least 9:55 if people can stick around with us. I've been grouping the questions. So Richard, I'm afraid it's going to be a bit of a quick fire for you. So we'll get through as many as possible, but there were a lot of Greenpeace specific ones, so we haven't been able to answer those. Starting off with some practicalities. So on this conversation, you're talking about fundraising emails. What counts as a fundraising email at Greenpeace? Is it only one that asks for money, or do you include impact emails with no ask into your definition of a fundraising email?
No, I wouldn't include impact emails with no ask as a fundraising email. I mean, they would have a fundraising ask at the bottom in the footer because of all of our emails that well, most of our emails, well, all of our emails that are sent out will have a standard footer on the end that will have a very subtle donation link. We do send impact emails out, but they tend to be sent by the other digital team, not the fundraising team. But I think that there's a general thing about like how do we work together. Like Greenpeace has a separate digital team that works on our petitions and our online asks and social media and things like that. I mean, a separate sort of fundraising team where it's not just a digital team. There's a lot of people who do fundraising roles, they're embedded. But I think there is a question about like how do you work together to sort of to come up with impact emails where, say, a fundraising ask is part of it, and how do we integrate it more opportunities? And it's like actually we're probably not there yet. I mean, there's things like this actually that were still, because it hadn't been a huge part of someone's role until recently, there's probably stuff like that we could be doing. But short answer to the question is, I wouldn't say that an impact email is a fundraising email. I would say the emails that we're talking about here are people who don't have a regular monthly donation as it is, and they're just asking people to set up to a new direct debit. Yeah, maybe I can send around some sort of screenshots of what the emails look like, but it's just an introductory ask. And then usually 3 or 4 buttons saying £5 a month, £10 a month, £15 a month, another amount.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we're talking about, we'll do a webinar follow-up blog as well, so it'd be great to include some screenshots of the emails in there. Another practical one, what platform or provider do you use for your online direct debits?
We use a platform called iRaiser now, which we've just recently moved to. We used to be split across Rapid Data for direct debits and BSD for one-off donations, but now we do everything via iRaiser, which I think is the letter I, razor.eu, if you want to check out that website.
Brilliant. And one of the things of sending more emails is obviously it takes more time to get sign-off. So what are the sign-off processes like at Greenpeace to get emails out the door?
Yeah, good. That is definitely one thing I really like about working at Greenpeace is, say if we've got more than 2 people signing off an email, that's kind of a problem. We try to not have any more than a couple of people signing something off. And it will be addressed and thought about seriously if there's more than, certainly if it goes beyond 3 people. And so we have a scheduling meeting on a Monday where we'll be deciding stuff, and if something gets put in an emergency, like or quickly, say we're trying to say something on Thursday or a Friday that week, we'll often just send an email to a campaigner saying, look, we've got something that's come up really quickly, can you sign it off? But often it'll be like related to their campaign anyway. So they have like a stake in wanting to sort of to sign it off really quickly.
Amazing. I feel like we need to kind of have that skywritten, no more than 2 people signing off an email. Everyone should be hearing that, hopefully. And on that, kind of, do you have any tips on getting other colleagues on board who are nervous about sending more emails?
I think that like testing can be your friend, and sort of saying, well, why don't we sort of send this out as a test? Like if you're confident, especially if it's a test that you're confident will have positive results, and be like, look, like I understand the nervousness about it. Why don't we do it to a small audience? And if it performs well, we'll then send it out to a wider audience. I mean, that's even something that we're still continuing to do now. Like, I think there's been some hesitancy in Greenpeace about sending emails to wide groups of people. We'd only send, say, like a fundraising ask on forests to people who'd, say if it was about forests, like protecting, South American forests, we'd only send it to people who signed a forest petition. And it was like, well, why? Like, why are we doing that? Like, what evidence do we have to? I mean, it's like, yeah, we'll get a slightly better rate, but do we? Are we sure it have like a massively negative effect? So I think that we're even still continuing to test our own assumptions and doing that via testing too, and really looking at the numbers.
That's a brilliant answer, thank you. And that leads to a question around audience segmentation, which is, how did you segment your email list as part of this program of activity? And did you see a difference in response from different audiences?
Sorry, there's an alarm going off there. I was a bit confused. How did we segment it?
Sorry, that's bad timing. Yeah, it's fine. It's a test. How do you segment the email list as part of this program of activity? So do you look at cash? Do you treat people who'd given a cash donation differently to people who'd never given a gift at all, for example, is one of the questions as well? Yeah,
well, certainly for fundraising emails, we have a very clear distinction with people who have an existing monthly donation to us. It's a separate team, like it's not me who is sending fundraising asks to existing supporters. That we've got an audience of somewhere about like 70,000 people or something like that who already have some kind of like ongoing support. So it's another team that sends those out. And then there's everybody else, like the rest of the sort of 1.5 million who don't have an existing like a regular donation, and that is the audience that I'm so that I'm sending emails to. So there's that very basic level of segmentation. Within that, there are some things that I was saying before that we've done in the past in terms of like, sometimes we'll just send emails to people who have done an action with us in the last 6 months, or have just signed like a petition, and we'll send an issue that's related to that petition. But as I say, I do think we kind of need to do more testing there ourselves about like, well, why do we segment it, and what is that really sort of like given to us? It's like, well, we'll get really like much higher response rates, which is great, but there's just this part of our audience then that just becomes really cold and we're just not talking to. So it's like, well, what are we kind of doing with that audience then? Like, why are they remaining on our list? Because they're just going to drop off and not even having any opportunities to do it.
Brilliant, thank you. A couple of questions around surveys. One which comes up every time we talk about surveys, which is, what do you do with the results of the survey? Do you share it with supporters? Do you look at it?
We do look at it, yeah, we absolutely look at it. We are very careful with our surveys. We make sure that we only launch a survey where it's going to be of use to a campaign. We don't just launch them for the sake of launching it. So they're agreed with campaigners, and they're often agreed with the head of a campaigns team. They'll be signing it off too. So we book in a presentation afterwards to go through the results. And it's not just fundraising who've been interested in it. It is like other campaigners who've helped push surveys forward. We're still trying to work out where we're at with them as an organisation in terms of like what we do with them. But certainly some of the campaigners that I've worked with have now taken the results of them and then taken people on a supporter journey afterwards. Like, say people have answered certain questions, have then followed up with them. Like, say if they indicate that they're interested in outreach, like our groups and our lobbying network and stuff like that, then we're passing those email addresses on to our team that does that area of work within Greenpeace, because we've now got this standard question at the end where it's like, what would you like to do with Greenpeace? And it's like, if people tick that box, they have always an opportunity to sort of to indicate that they're interested in outreach and joining a group and all of that sort of stuff, and of just sort of like making sure people are sort of like passed through there. So yeah, we do look at the results like quite a bit, but it is an area of work, definitely, like, is in terms of making sure we analyze it. But I think there's also, we can make that easier by making sure we don't have surveys that are, say, longer than 15 questions.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm just going to ask one more question, which is about kind of the ongoing life of these new regular givers. So have you been able to look, are you going to be looking at the kind of retention rate of those and how they compare to other new regular givers? Do they have the same journey? What's the next steps for them?
Yeah, you're going to ask me the attrition rate. I've got to confess, I've actually not worked in fundraising for that long. And I don't have a sense of how it compares to other teams. I can certainly sort of like dig that out. Certainly from the number crunching that we did at the end of last year, that the head of my team did, it was good, you know, because people are choosing to sort of to opt in. And I know that when we've had, like, say, done some street fundraising in the past, like Greenpeace UK doesn't do that much street fundraising. Actually, I don't think we do any, we do events, but like there was issues there around, say, people dropping off, but I don't want to misrepresent those results. But certainly from what I've seen, that yeah, because people are sort of choosing to sort of to set up this donation, they are good. We're not getting a high level of people choosing to sort of to set up a direct debit and then cancelling their subscription. Certainly no worse than any of our other channels.
Just to jump in on that, on a general rule, we tend to see direct debits that come from any kind of web activity, including email, the retention rate's much better than offline channels, where there's a greater element of social pressure that can go into saying under direct debit. And for the audience, for previous Greenpeace donors who, on the program we worked on that side, who set up a direct debit, I think the retention rate was something like 93% after 6 months. So at the kind of top end. So I would expect, hopefully, that we'll see a similar retention rate on these ones.
Thanks, Alex.
Brilliant. I think we are at time now, because I'm sure people have got lots to be getting on with on their day. But like I said, we'll do a follow-up blog, because there's been lots of really brilliant questions I think everyone will benefit from hearing answers to. So we'll work and get that out in the next couple of weeks. And then it just remains to say thank you for everyone tuning in. And thank you, Richard and Greenpeace, for being so generous with sharing all this information. I think Rachel in the comments mentioned it's really valuable for organizations that aren't able to do so much testing and have smaller lists to be able to see all of this. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. And we will follow up with our recording of this for you. And there's the alarm again. Bye.
Bye.